morning on this Sunday, April 5th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang from a temporary studio here at Fox 5. A change of heart for Governor Brian Kemp as he orders Georgians to shelter in place. An 1,100% increase in unemployment claims as more companies and businesses have no choice but to lay off employees. And House Speaker David Ralston doubles down on his push to delay Georgia's primary. His reasons have made national headlines. We're continuing to adhere to all of the social distancing guidelines, so my fellow gang members are joining us from their homes or offices. Theron, Phil, Janelle, and Kathy, I miss you. Let's start the debate and discussion right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
By order of the governor, Georgians must now shelter in place until at least April 13th.
I will sign a statewide shelter-in-place order.
The governor says he came to that decision not because of the increasing pressure. Instead, he says it was recent CDC data showing people can be infected with COVID-19, show no symptoms, yet still spread the virus to others. A statement many criticized, saying that information has been out for more than a month. But the governor also pointed out Georgia's hospitals will reach peak capacity on April 23rd. The governor also expressed confidence in defeating COVID-19, but tells weary Georgians everyone has to be on the same team.
To win this war, we have to hunker down and continue to chop a lot of wood.
Shelter-in-place order goes until April 13th, at least until April 13th. And Janelle, I want to dive right in here because 2 weeks ago, you said that the governor should have gone for this kill shot. And now Democrats and others really across the country are ridiculing him for his reasons to call for the shelter-in-place now. I mean, he said new information came to light that the coronavirus can be contagious before people even show symptoms. And I feel like that's something we've been hearing for weeks, yet the science really has been changing daily. And now we're hearing that we should be perhaps wearing masks when we go outside. So what are your thoughts on kind of the ridicule that the governor has been taking from across the country?
Yeah, so just to start, I did get some valuable information. So what happened was 24 hours before the press conference, the CDC put out additional data showing that asymptomatic people are actually transmitting it at a more aggressive rate than what was anticipated. So that is the information that he was referring to, is that now we know exactly how aggressive and how contagious asymptomatic people are. Now, he obviously misspoke, and I think the biggest issue is that he didn't provide the context or share about this new information, which is what created all of this, confusion. So at this point, I think that he just needs to kind of ride out the media frenzy and then continue to work together, because I'm actually really, really pleased with the work that our governor as well as Mayor Bottoms has done as they work together in a bipartisanship to actually lead this state. I mean, without their leadership, we could be looking like New York. And so I just think he just got to ride out this media frenzy.
Kathy, weigh in here. Should the governor just come out and say, you know what, I misspoke there, but my orders are now shelter in place? You've called for him to do this several weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's really late. It's better late than never at this point. Janelle just said, we won't be like New York or something like that. Sorry, Janelle, I can't see you, so I can't recall exactly what you said, but we will be like New York in context. What we do know is that we're going to be about 2,000 hospital beds short on April 24th and about 1,000 ICU units short. What the governor can do right now are two things: expand Medicaid, which is what I've been talking about now for a couple of months, and then make sure that we are being as aggressive as possible to try to make up those beds in ICU units and like 1,300 ventilators that we know will be short.
Phil, Theron is going to be joining us in just a few minutes, but I want to get your take on, the reasons that the governor cited his decision to act now, and then what do you think about kind of the future here and his shelter in place? Do you think he'll have to extend it?
Well, as you said at the outset, it goes till April 13th, and if we go back to the governor's press briefing. I think he did fine. If you read the transcript of the briefing, it was during the question and answer period where, as Janelle says, he mangled his sentence, and they later clarified it. His staff had to clarify it. What's really difficult at the federal and state level for all governors and the administration are these models. They keep evolving and changing. In fact, on Friday, the White House is saying one of the next hot spots could be Georgia. And of course, you just had mentioned that we've got a problem with hospital capacity, which we need to be looking out for. But I think if you look politically, I think that most people are going to cut the governor some slack. You could argue back and forth, should the shelter in place have been done a couple weeks ago. I think if you were intellectually honest, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, we didn't have the models and the data that we have now. That goes for all governors, and that cuts across all party lines. I think you're seeing a lot of politics, of course, enter into this. The Democrats, I have to shake my head because, Joe Biden can make nonsensical sentences and make no sense, and they basically gloss that over, and their media allies gloss that over or omit it, and yet Brian Kemp mangles a sentence even though he was correct in the context of his remarks. They get hysterical.
Farron, I'll let you weigh in here on Phil's remarks.
Well, I think, we just got to move on from it. I mean, obviously, is what Janelle said. The governor misspoke. He definitely did not do, I guess, what he wanted to do. I was one of the many people that actually had to go back and really research what he meant. But what he said definitely was not exactly what he meant. But more importantly, to just take partisanship out of it, Lori, the bottom line is this. We now have a statewide shelter in place. It's left up to the governor to really continue doing what he was doing, and I hope he will continue to do, and that is over-communicate with the public, and more importantly, continue to allow mayors, county officials, public safety officials, public health officials to make sure that they're all communicating to make sure that we keep all Georgians safe.
Theron, I want to follow up that question with you because obviously Mayor Bottoms really has been challenged to keep people at home, right? We've seen people gathering on the Beltline. We've seen people out on the streets. I mean, people have been drag racing out on the streets. How difficult is this order going to be? It's hard to order people at home. I mean, we're not used to this. It's not our human nature. So how hard is this going to be to enforce this across the state?
Well, I think the mayor has made it very clear, Lori, that she's saying stay at home. I mean, she's gone on every single newscast nationally and locally that she can to really convey the urgency and the severity of this disease and this virus, and basically saying to people, please stay at home. Now, drag racing and all that stuff, I know that Chief Shields and the public safety officials are going to crack down on that. That's something that they've been working on a long time. So for our viewers, that's something that has happened a little bit before the executive order went into place. But more importantly, I think the mayor, you will see a level of enforcement start to increase. There is enforcement. She's rode the streets herself to make sure that people are actually staying at home. And so you'll see more to come from her and her executive orders to ensure that people are actually staying at home.
And Phil, doesn't this come down to personal responsibility? I'm not only protecting myself, but I'm protecting others, and especially the healthcare workers who are on the front lines. So we'll guilt you to stay home.
Well, yes, and that's the whole point of the stay-at-home order. And I have to laugh. I mean, there's not that much traffic out. There shouldn't be any drag racing permitted whatsoever. Where are the police crackdowns now? When it comes to distancing and 6 feet away, I don't think anybody ought to be arrested for that. But they certainly say on the Atlanta Beltline, when you see these images on television, they certainly should be warned to keep a distance at this point.
All right, well, coming up, Georgia's Department of... Go ahead, Theron, real quick.
Now, I just wanted to say to Phil that there has been enforcement on the Beltline. Drag racing is not something that the city of Atlanta is permitting. They're going to definitely crack down on that.
All right, we'll leave it there. Coming up, Georgia's Department of Labor processed the most claims ever in a week. We'll discuss straight ahead.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
134,000. That's how many unemployment claims the Georgia Department of Labor processed this past week, the highest number ever in 1 week's time. So, Kathy, there's no end in sight here, and many people will be relying on government to get them through these tough times. Weigh in on this.
Yeah, well, they will. And, starting this week, people can go to their local bank or business owners and try to apply for various loans and grants to help them keep their employees on the payroll for the next couple of months. And I would really urge people to do that. We've got to keep people working so that they can pay for essential supplies and food and the kinds of things that they need for their families. This is going to be really devastating. And what I would say is, if you're getting bored with being at home, understand that staying at home means we get through this faster.
Janelle, have you heard anything about the impact of the state budget? I mean, will Georgia and other states also rely on the federal government, not just really for the treatment of COVID-19, but other essential services provided by the government?
So I haven't heard anything in particular. However, I think it's kind of safe to say that there will be some government assistance that will have to take place in this. And I have to reiterate what Kathy just said, that this is more of a reason why you need to stay at home, because this is only going to get worse if we just continue to, not abide by the rules and the guidelines that have been presented for us. But most certainly the government on all levels, the statewide as well as federal, which we obviously see the federal government has kind of stepped up to the plate, but we are going to definitely have to see some statewide stuff come into play over time, is what I'm thinking.
Theron, Mayor Bottom said that all frontline city workers will receive a $500 bump in pay. CEO Michael Thurman got some pushback trying to push through a similar raise for the county's 3,500 frontline workers. What do you think about all of this, and what do you think will happen in DeKalb eventually?
Well, I think Mayor Bottoms and CEO Thurman are fighting for their workers. I mean, anytime when you're offering people who are on the front line, these are essential employees of the city and the county who are basically risking their lives every single day, waking up, leaving their families to go out and provide us with basic services. And so I think the mayor and the CEO are definitely on the right side of this issue. As it pertains to DeKalb County, I think you saw the CEO express that he did not want to be characterized by some of his fellow commissioners as someone who is trying to give out so much money that the county doesn't have. He's done a really good job to eliminate deficit spending, has balanced the budget since he's been CEO, and I do think you'll see him continue to reach out to those commissioners, about half of them that were critical. So ultimately, he's going to make sure that those folks have the money that they deserve.
Phil, don't you think most fiscal conservatives would agree that these workers deserve these raises under these conditions?
Well, yes, as long as they can try to stay in budget guidelines. And of course, I think the federal government has done a great job. If you watch the president's briefings almost daily with regard to the payroll protection loans that you can get. And I would encourage people to get on the website and take a look at that and see if they qualify. And it's fairly easy. And basically, I think that all politicians want to have the workers keep working. I think that's the bottom line, whether you're a fiscal conservative or an ultra-liberal.
All right. Kathy and Phil, I want you both to weigh in on this next topic. The State Board of Pardons and Paroles is looking to release up to 200 nonviolent offenders early because of the pandemic. We've also seen 13 inmates at the Fulton County Jail tested positive for the virus. Phil, weigh in first. Should the nonviolent offenders be released early?
Well, I would say no, and I want the State Board of Pardon and Paroles to actually define what they need by quote-unquote nonviolent criminals, because if you look at the criminal code, state and federal, you've got some sex offenders that are classified as quote-unquote nonviolent. You have residential burglars that are supposedly nonviolent, and you have drug traffickers, so you don't want those people back out on the streets. And are they gang members? No gang members should be released from any of our prisons. You know, under the U.S. Constitution, these inmates get the finest of medical treatment. They're first in line to medical facilities. They don't have to wait in line like everybody else under Obamacare.
Kathy, your response to Phil.
I just want to go like, Listen, these 200 people that they're thinking about releasing are toward the end of their sentence. They are people that have been looked at very, very closely, and I think we need to do this. Anything we can do to release the pressure of infection in the prisons is going to be really important. All of those prisoners need to be tested before they're released, so we know that we're releasing them back into the community, into their families in a healthy state. But we also have to be able to fund shelter and food and funds to support them out of the prisons while everyone self-quarantines. We cannot assume that they're going to walk out of prison with a kind of a social safety net in place. That doesn't happen on a good day, and it certainly isn't going to happen in these conditions.
Theron, these are difficult decisions for everyone involved. What's a county, a city, and what is the state supposed to do in these situations if we're seeing continuous outbreaks of the virus inside these facilities?
I totally agree with Kathy. I think that, these are people who are nearing the end of their sentences. They got to basically make sure that they're tested. And at the end of the day, prison and jails are not a place where people go to die there. Eventually they're going to have to get out. But I think it's got to be imperative that we make sure that they're tested, make sure that we understand how they're going to be monitored once they're released, and make sure that we're open and transparent with it to the public.
We'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone. Coming up, some are questioning the House Speaker's reasons for wanting a delay in Georgia's primary. Stay tuned.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
House Speaker David Ralston and other Republicans are pushing to delay Georgia's May 19th primary. But Ralston is coming under fire after an interview with FetcherNews.com. He basically said because every Georgia voter will get a ballot application in the mail, it will drive up turnout and be devastating to Republicans. Janelle, then Theron, I want you to weigh in here. Janelle first.
Okay, so I do feel that some things are best known and not spoken, but I actually agree with Speaker Ralston, and this is why. In 2016, between the era of 2016 and 2018, Democratic organizations registered a little over 100 or around 190,000 people to vote. These are new registrants. Of those new registrants, only about 80,000 of them actually went out and voted. So the truth is that data does show that Democrats have a problem or have struggled to actually turn out the vote when it comes to going to the polls. But during that time and during the governor's race, I know Stacey Abrams did a huge absentee ballot push. So that the Democrats have shown to be a little more aggressive when it comes to the absentee ballot piece. So I think that's where Speaker Ralston was coming from when it was stated. Do I think that it has anything to do with what I'm sure the left is going to say as voter suppression? Not at all, because if you are getting your ballot, that means that you can vote. And then not only that, but if it's a regular process, then you just need to go out and vote. So I just don't think the left can use this one.
Theron, can the left use this one?
Well, what everyone should be saying, not just the left, is that if we are going to have an election in May, on May 19th, then we need to make sure that if vote by mail is the reliable source of voting, then we need to make sure we give postage to these voters and make sure we communicate with them of how to vote. But the other thing that's not really being talked about, Lori, is that, okay, let's say we move forward with the election in May, which I do support that we should keep it as is, but how do we get poll workers in? We know that some of our poll workers who have been managing the polls for decades are elderly and more fragile people who the governor is basically saying you should stay at home. And then let's say if we do have this sort of robust turnout in absentee ballots, and then who's going to count the absentee ballots? And so I think the one thing that's missing here is the federal guidelines consider election workers as essential. And so if they're essential, and then okay, how do we make sure we have enough to make sure that the process is handled fairly? So let's end this debate about May and June. Definitely the speaker and I disagree about whether or not this is going to allow Democrats to win. Clearly that's something that Janelle is right, It probably, we always say, and historically, Republicans have, up until 2016 and 18, have done better with absentee and vote by mail than Democrats. And so ultimately, I think we need to make sure that the funding and the infrastructure is in place to make sure that this election, if it happens in May, goes smoothly.
Okay, I want to move on to a new development because this is pretty big news this week. New developments in Senator Kelly Loeffler's stock transactions after a private Senate briefing on the coronavirus. Now, new documents show the amount was much more than previously reported, closer to $20 million, selling off shares in retail stores and buying stock in a company that makes hazmat suits. Now, Loeffler denies any wrongdoing. So, Phil, I want you to weigh in here on just how this news will impact her election efforts.
Well, obviously, perception doesn't help, but I think the fact that she's reiterating adamantly that she has financial advisors that are doing her portfolio and that she has nothing to do with it and gets notified later is valid. And I think that's just a fact of life that she has to keep repeating and repeating and repeating again in her campaign ads. Now, as I said last week, I think it would have been smart, and it's not too late to do this. If I was Senator Loeffler, I would just say, look, I welcome an SEC, a Securities and Exchange Commission investigation. I believe I'll be cleared because I've done nothing wrong. And then when you get the clearance, you can say, look, all of this media hysteria was inaccurate and wrong. So I think she needs to proceed with that.
Kathy, Phil mentioned that, it's about perception here. When the unemployment numbers are where they are and escalating daily, when folks who even are employed are worried about losing their jobs, how does this look in terms of perception?
Well, it looks terrible. And I think that it's not perception, it's reality. She sold the stocks, that's there. Now you can decide for yourselves, people who are watching, if you think that she sold them after receiving information or not. We'll have an investigation, we'll get more information about that. But it is hurting her in the polls. She is now polling at about half of what Doug Collins is polling, and she's polling behind Reverend Warnock in this race right now. We're still a long way to November, but it's clear as a sitting senator that this is having an impact, and it's not a good one.
Janelle, do you want to weigh in? I've got about 20 seconds. You are her honorary co-chairman.
Yes, absolutely. So as I stated before, over and over again, Senator Loeffler has not provided any information to the third-party company that has managed her accounts. As a matter of fact, the information that you have, the reason why we have so much of it is because she provided additional information than what was required through the financial disclosures. But let's be clear, from a simple Google, you can see that in 2016, they did the exact same thing to President Trump. They said that he should put all of his investments in accounts and turn them off or put them in a blind trust. And he said the same thing. Look, I decide over my rights. I'm not managing them. I have nothing to do with it. Ultimately, this is to create a great divide, just like Kathy mentioned, to show that the polls are splitting the Republicans up, and this is going to help a Democrat walk right in if we don't get our stuff together and really deal with this. But this is straight a great divide and a hit piece against Senator Loeffler.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone. And coming up, we will have winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Theron, I'd like to start with you because the world indeed lost an incredible leader, a civil rights icon this past week, the Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowery.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. I definitely want to extend my sincere condolences to Dr. Lowery's family. He is a giant in the civil rights community, equal rights community. He played a pivotal role in my life. I remember as a young graduate from Clark Atlanta University going to the Georgia Coalition of People's Agendas meeting. So definitely want to offer my condolences. And then my last winner is going to be Vicki Morrow, who is now going on to be the executive director of the March of Dimes of Georgia. She was at the National Black Arts Festival for many years, and definitely want to thank her for her outstanding service.
Well, congrats to her. We have about 2 minutes, Phil, so you've got some time.
Well, my winner is the Augusta National Golf Club, and as you know, it should have been the start of Masters Week, which is a big economic boost for Augusta area and the state. But instead, the Augusta National did a great thing, and they actually donated $2 million for more testing in the Augusta area through Augusta University, and also basically providing support for that Augusta community. So that was a nice effort there. And my loser is Stacey Abrams, the defeated gubernatorial candidate. She still keeps running around with the myth and the lie that Brian Kemp stole the election to be governor, and that there's voter suppression. And Lucy McBath, the Democrat congressional candidate in the 6th district, is parroting that line. Those are losers. No documentation whatsoever.
All right, Janelle.
Okay, my winner is the Atlanta Black Chamber. They will be hosting an information session, virtual information session on April 9th. The information session will cover how to apply for the stimulus aid that is provided to small businesses. And if you would like to attend this virtual session, you can RSVP at abcsbatraining420.eventbrite.com. And then my loser is everyone who will not stay at home. This is getting absolutely ridiculous. We are all adults. We understand the magnitude of this. And even if you don't see it as a crisis in your own personal life, at least do it for someone else. So just stay at home so that we can get through this.
A lot of losers out there. Kathy, we've got about less than 30 seconds.
Oh, darn. Well, listen, I think the best quote of the week was John Haupert, CEO of Grady Hospital. He said that when all is said and done, they're going to have a deficit of $78 million to $100 million because they won't have insurance reimbursements from people who are uninsured and who are seeking help in this time. I'm going to keep talking about the $3 billion that we're paying for, but we're not accepting here in Georgia because our governor and our General Assembly won't expand Medicaid. So thank you for John Haupert for speaking the truth about the wreckage of what we're going to have to pay when it's over. And let's just recognize Bill Withers died today, and we're going to miss him.
And I got to leave it there. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Remember, we're all in this together. See you next week.